Good epidemiological practices, Wikipedia audio. Good epidemiological practices was a set of guidelines produced by the U.S. Chemical Manufacturers Association in 1991 to limit the effectiveness of epidemiology in regulation. It was then transferred over to the tobacco industry around 1993. It failed to make much impact on the US and European regulators, but may have had more influence in its later manifestations in Asia and particularly China. The complexities of creating good epidemiological practices developments have been well examined by University of San Francisco researchers Stanton Glantz and Elisa Keong in their paper Tobacco Industry Efforts to Subvert the IARC's Second-Hand Smoke Study. These were both industry programs designed to set risk evaluation standards which could be forced through by legislation, and imposed on the agencies, so hamstring the agency's ability to regulate. Tobacco's GEP. In February 1993, Philip Morris USA Disinformation Executive Ellen Merlo wrote a memo to her CEO William Campbell outlining their activities in the area of sound science. They had funded the PR firm APCO to set up the early task Sound Science/Junk Science operation, which was related to the GEP scheme through George L. Carlo, a science entrepreneur who worked with Federal Focus and prepared one of the early draft documents. At this time, the legislative and public activist attacks on the tobacco industry had escalated, and they blamed this on the twisted science used by the EPA. In Europe, the UN's International Agency for Research into Cancer was about to release a similar report, which the tobacco industry also needed to counter. Helmut Reif, Tom Borelli, and Mitch Ritter at Philip Morris's Science and Technology Division thought the CMA's GEP could be improved to help PM develop standards for second-hand smoke epidemiological studies. This initiative to constructively improve epidemiology would enlist the assistance of the industry's consultants, and they could then run an offensive strategy, essentially another proactive effort by the industry to shape the scientific process. Joanna Sullivan, Philip Morris's main PR/science manipulator in Europe, advised her American superiors on how GEP might be used to combat the IARC's report, since this would give United Nations weight to the claim that second-hand smoke was potentially cancerous to non-smokers. By establishing the standards of epidemiology and by using their influence in Congress to have GEP mandated by legislation, they hoped to design a set of established procedural standards for epidemiology. The innovation here was that they aimed to attack the techniques relied on by the EPA and IARC scientists. In the past, they had focused attacks on specific adverse scientific findings and reports. GEP was designed to direct an attack on the techniques of epidemiology itself. They may have had little hope that this would be widely accepted by the majority of epidemiologists or by the regulators, but it made possible a vigorous public relations campaign in the media to challenge and denigrate any adverse findings. Initially, Philip Morris utilized a small panel of trusted epidemiologists who regularly serviced the industry when it needed to defend against some adverse finding. They were requested to improve on the Chemical Manufacturers Association's GEP. Later they extended this mandate by conducting seminars on GEP and good risk assessment practice around the world. The tobacco industry itself needed to remain invisible, and so they needed the front provided by third-party think tanks and old allies. The main organization hired to run the GEP program was Federal Focus Incorporated, a PR company set up during the second term of the Reagan administration by two top agency officials, Thorn Aukter, who had been the director of the OSHA, and James J. Tozzi, who had been Reagan's deregulation czar, as head of the OIRA, at the OMB. These two and the head of the EPA were among the 20 or so top agency executives forced to resign over Reagan's regulatory scandals. Jim Tozzi's technique at the OIRA was to block regulators from regulating by denying their agencies funding unless they cancelled one regulation before adding another. Panels and conferences. The Maine tobacco law firm, Covington and Burling, was also involved both in promoting the idea and in recruiting scientists willing to participate, usually only when assured that payment would be laundered through the law firm. CNB lawyer John Rupp initiated similar activities in Italy and Germany. The total expenses for this program in 1997 were about $300,000. The GEP program experts that Auchter and Tozzi enlisted were pre-screened by Philip Morris issues managers and Federal Focus, and the results they produced were pre-tested at a number of conferences. The first, known as the Lansdowne Conference, was held at a U.S. conference center with only a few of their most trusted scientist helpers. They then widened the advisory pool and held a London conference where Philip Morris opened the operation to British American Tobacco and the other companies. They established what became known as the London Principles. A German conference soon followed. Generally, GEP failed to influence policy makers in America and Europe, so it was tried in Asia through conferences of the Asian Whitecoats Group and with other recruits in Kuala Lumpur, Hong Kong, Yokohama, Beijing, and then Guangzhou. Ted Sanders, who ran the scientific affairs operations for Philip Morris in Europe, provides us with an excellent overview of how the Philip Morris GEP unraveled in a long letter of complaint to Kathy Ellis, his executive overseer in Brussels. The inadvertent whistleblower.